learning event around safeguarding adult review for Sarah, and Sarah was a real person, as I said, so there might be people in the call who've worked with Sarah, so please be respectful of others throughout the session. Can I ask that you remain on mute for the duration of the session? If you've got any questions, if you put them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to respond to all of these. But as it is a large group on the call, it might be that we can't get back to all the questions, and we might need to respond following the session. So the aims of this session are to discuss the safeguarding adult review criteria and advise on how to refer for a safeguarding adult review, to explore the learning outcomes and recommendations for SAR Sarah, and explore the resources available to you on the Safeguarding Adult Board website. So a safeguarding adult review is a statutory requirement of the Care Act 2014, and it explores cases that involve adults with care and support needs that may have died or been seriously harmed as a result of suspected result of abuse or neglect, and there's reasonable cause for concern about how the Safeguarding Adults Board members or organisations work together to safeguard the person. So the purpose of a SAR is to prevent future harm, and we do this by looking at lessons learned, promoting multi-agency working, reviewing our policies and procedures, making service improvements or developments. So the importance of being here today together is to ensure that what happens to Sarah doesn't happen to another person in Cumbria. So making a SAR referral, if you feel you've got a case that you've supported that might require a safeguarding adults review, you can request this by completing a referral to the Safeguarding Adults Board, and there's a link on the slides that can navigate you to that. For support, contact your agencies, your own agency safeguarding lead, and complete the referral. And you would need to ensure the details of how and why the person's circumstances meet Section 44 criteria for safeguarding, and ensure that you detail the individual's concerns of family members and all the interested parties, or any organisations that have worked with or are working with the adult, and professional and board partner agencies that are involved with the person. So Sarah was a white woman of British heritage, and she was in her 40s when she died of self-neglect. Sarah had lived with her father in their housing association property. Sarah's father had described her as having undiagnosed mental illness. Referrals were made for assessments in relation to Sarah's mental health needs. However, as Sarah didn't want to engage, these referrals didn't progress. Sadly, Sarah's father died, and her aunt and uncle were very concerned that Sarah would be unable to care for herself. They approached many different agencies to try and get support for her. Sarah had always lived with her parents in their council tenancy. She'd attended a mainstream school, but as an adult she became more reclusive, and her parents had described Sarah as having schizophrenia type symptoms. This was never diagnosed, as Sarah didn't have any contact with mental health services and hadn't seen her GP in many years. Sarah had also not worked for many years and didn't claim any benefits in her own right. She was financially reliant on her parents. Sarah also appeared to be dependent on her parents for many of her basic tasks of daily living, and her uncle recalled Sarah seldom left the house and was usually dressed in her pyjamas. Police, housing, health services and adult social care were all aware of concerns about Sarah, and agencies did endeavour to contact her to offer support, but Sarah often didn't respond or declined services. 3 months after the death of her father, Sarah's body was found at her home. She died some weeks earlier, and the pathologist was unable to determine the cause of death. The coroner recorded the conclusion as self-neglect and issued a report under Regulation 28 to adult social care. After an inquest, the coroner can write a Prevention of Future Death Regulation 28 report, and this happens especially when the court has heard evidence that further avoidable deaths could happen if preventative action isn't taken. Regulation 28 reports must be responded to, and evidence how changes have been or will be made in response to the coroner's recommendations. And the SAR for Sarah explores responses by agencies for Sarah and her father to identify learning for both individuals and multi-agency safeguarding practice. So there was lots of positive agency involvement for Sarah. Police referred to adult social care from following police involvement back in 2016, and police also completed domestic abuse risk assessment checklists. A housing officer also made safeguarding adult referral, and a Section 42 safeguarding inquiry was initiated, and Sarah and her father were visited at home by a practitioner. At this visit, Sarah's father confirmed difficulties in his relation to his own health, and also difficulties of Sarah living off his income. Sarah was given advice on how to claim benefits in her own right, and a referral was made through occupational therapy for her father. Following the death of her father, Sarah's and her aunt and her uncle had support from a bereavement nurse. But despite concern that Sarah clearly might not clearly understand certain situations or decision specific, such as her own care and support needs, her understanding of accessing the benefit system, or the impact of the loss of her father, a formal capacity assessment never took place. So 45% of SARs are linked to self-neglect, and there are numerous safeguarding adult reviews carried out by many local authorities across the country where there's been a concern in relation to self-neglect, refusal of support. And there's numerous. They include Brighton and Hove safeguarding adult review of a 59-year-old gentleman who was rough sleeping in the city, and the coroner recorded a verdict of misadventure and self-neglect. Mr. I was a gentleman from Wokingham who had a brain injury and a lower leg amputation. He was prone to depression and developed an increase in dependence on alcohol. He resented contact with services and was often aggressive to visitors, including care staff. His case was transferred from the local authority long-term team to the mental health review team, and at this time there was significant restructure of the local authority. And this led to a lack of a clear accountability for the case. And during this period, the teams weren't aware that Mr. I's physical health was significantly deteriorating, and he died unexpectedly in June 2015. He was found in his home several days later by police. Mrs. D first came home to adult social care in December 2017. She was from Slough, and following an admission to hospital, she was referred by a GP for social care assessments. And this assessment concluded that Mrs. D was managing relatively independently with low-level input from Age UK. A year later, there were further concerns, particularly in relation to memory and level of confusion and ability to continue to manage independently, numerous hospital admissions, discharges with a package of care, and Mrs. D died in circumstances that gave rise to significant concerns about the way in which professionals and local services had worked together in this situation. There's lots of similar type cases, too many to go through. The links are included in the slides if you want to kind of read further. So the key themes in relation to Sarah are similar to the concerns and themes mentioned in some of the scenarios real life scenarios I've just mentioned, and the importance of multi-agency approach, the real importance to make sure around information sharing and agreeing professional responsibility. Safeguarding is everyone's business, and we need to have a clear agreement of recording within MDT's multidisciplinary team meetings. There needs to also be professional accountability to follow up, an agreement about where that's documented and how it's shared. For this Sarah, the themes around ensuring involvement for aunt and uncle and listening to their concerns, and involvement for Sarah of Sarah, and considering her and understanding of all the when you're providing all the relevant information when following up from referrals, including considering the need for formal assessments of capacity. And then a joined up practice of completing multi-agency risk assessments. So I'm just going to hand over to Sarah.
Okay, everyone. So the SAR for Sarah identified 5 learning points that I'm going to talk you through. So number 1 learning point was that of the importance of prevention. And the SAR for Sarah identified how informal carers play an important role in supporting adults with care and support needs. And carers may not recognise their role as a carer. It's questionable whether Sarah's father identified himself necessarily as a carer, so they may miss out on crucial financial funding, practical and emotional support, and they may also have their own complex needs and vulnerabilities, which means all agencies need to be proactive in reaching out to carers to support them, looking at early interventions and proactive approaches, making advanced plans for them and the care of that person, and being very alert to the risk of carer breakdown and burnout. This SAR highlighted the missed opportunities to recognise and respond to escalating carer stress and to consider the risk of domestic abuse. Even if the person's refusing, it's important for us all to realise that even if that person's refusing support themselves, the carer can still access support in their own rights and is entitled to their own assessment under the Care Act as a carer in their own right. So they shouldn't be lost as part of this process. A carer's assessment could have been offered to Sarah's father and aunt and uncle, and so sadly that was one of the omissions with regard to this case and then part of the learning. As part of National Carers Week, which we've highlighted here on the 5th to the 11th of June, the board are focusing on the rights and needs of carers. This is just for everybody's information through a series of briefings that will be on social media. Carers can sign up to the board website, and also just for any staff that aren't already aware, they can also sign up to the newsletters so that they get all the latest news and briefings that can be disseminated amongst their teams. The second learning point was regarding empowerment and making safeguarding personal, and the importance of this, the fact that the Care Act requires us to safeguard adults in a way that supports them making choices and having control as much as they can about what they want. Making safeguarding a personal approach is person-led, outcome-focused, enhances involvement, choice and control, and should be aimed to improve quality of life, well-being and safety. Making safeguarding personal is embedded within the 6 core principles of safeguarding adults and fundamentally in the well-being principle of the Care Act. Practitioners must be assured that adults have sufficient information to make informed choices. Practitioners should be vigilant to the signals that may call into question an adult's capacity to make the relevant decisions. And sadly, there was a question from a number of agencies about Sarah's capacity to make decisions and take the necessary steps to assess this. So we'd be looking at mental capacity assessment that were decision specific, looking at any decisions that were required to be made with regard to Sarah, and so the learning is for other adults if there's any concerns about an adult's capacity. Making safeguarding personal encompasses our duty of care. Even when an adult has capacity, reasonable steps must be taken to respond to identified need, proportionate into preventing risks. So engaging adults who may be resistant to support needs to be approached with sensitivity and creativity in reaching out. Agencies need to be attuned to hearing concerns from families and carers and demonstrate flexibility in how referrals are made in ensuring that families and carers are kept involved and informed of the responses to their concerns. So the question was, did Sarah even know what support options might be available to her? We've got a short video just about making safeguarding personal, which I'm hoping can be launched at your end, if that's okay, Jackie.
Jackie, we just can't hear it. Okay.
Okay. It worked yesterday when I I'll try again.
Sorry, I was just asking colleagues if they could talk a little quieter. Can you hear me okay when I'm speaking?
We can. The video is playing, but we can't hear it.
Jackie, it's Claire. Sorry, when you share it, there's a thing where it says include audio. It's not dead obvious, but if you don't press it, it won't play with the sound. Yeah, it's not showing on there. It's not that. It's like it's like a slide button, and you slide it, and it says include. I think it's include audio.
It's not showing. I think it might be that it might need to ask to perhaps if we can try and look at that at the end of the session, to play it at the end of the session.
Okay, no worries. So what we'll move on to there, that was just giving you some adults talking about how safeguarding could be made personal from their own perspectives. If we could move on to, this slide is just talking about a toolkit, the Local Government Association toolkit that provides a significant number of excellent tools to support people practicing in Cumbria and people who require support with regard to making safeguarding personal. So the link's there for you. There's a handbook that guides you through the best approach and the effective application of safeguarding by providing a range of helpful tools and practice-based case examples, which I think everyone will agree, case examples are some of the best things really to support learning. Can we move to the next slide, please? We've got learning point 3. Okay, so learning point 3 was in relation to protection and proportionality. And the SAR for SARA highlighted some good examples of practitioners being vigilant to concerns about SARA and being proactive in following up on this, as Jackie's already said. However, there were also repeated examples where there was a lack of professional curiosity, which will be a phrase that everyone's becoming hopefully more and more familiar with. And but sadly, at the same time, because it's been what's being encouraged for us to really be professionally curious and inquiring, and it's being identified that this is one of the things that is sometimes being missed with regard to management of care. And that we shouldn't be dealing with things with cases in an episodic manner, so that it's really important to look at the whole picture of an adult and who for joined up working. So for multi-agencies to sit down and actually share their information to make sure that you've got the fullest picture possible of that adult in order to support the best decision making and risk assessment possible. The challenge is how in our practice we join the dots, make links between previous referrals, take account of referrals from or in relation to other family members, friends and people that share the family home or share acquaintances. So there's a recognition that this is often really challenging with regard to practice, but actually massively beneficial and really important. So this is made clear in one of the learning points. The SAR reiterates learning from other SARs, including Pauline and George, about the need for practitioners to be professionally curious, to question and delve deeper, to gain an understanding of the person's situation, including their needs and the risks. Where there are concerns of self-neglect that are raised, it needs to be formally evaluated, including the likely trajectory. For example, the impact of Sarah's childhood and the her early adult experiences, and then the death of her mum and her father and her dependency on her parents were all factors that increase the potential risk to Sarah and really would have benefited from assessment and input. Just delving into professional curiosity a little bit further, just to explain for anyone that isn't clear and hasn't accessed one of the sessions, curiosity required to support practitioners to question and challenge the information they receive, to identify concerns and to make connections to enable a greater understanding of that person's situation. Adults, it's really important for practitioners to understand that adults involved in safeguarding inquiries may feel embarrassed, ashamed, hurt, or traumatized. And being curious by asking sensitive and respectful questions will allow information to be discovered and enable appropriate support to be provided. That's come from the Local Government Association, and there's a reference for further reading there. In analysis, sorry, I can't say the word analysis. In an analysis of 37 SARs and serious case reviews, 35% contained recommendations that encourage person-centered care and applied the principles of making safeguarding personal. So the real importance of that. 30% of the sampled SARs contained recommendations relating to Mental Capacity Act. 22% had recommendations relating to a need for better safeguarding literacy, so people to just really understand safeguarding and the processes and assessments. A review of 113 SARs contained within the Social Care Institute for Excellence database at the end of 2019 identified that 16 make explicit reference to professional curiosity. And we've got the reference Anchor et al. In the slides. Of the remaining SARs, 69 contained features which indicate where professional curiosity could have impacted on some aspect of the situation, such as taking account of case histories, applying relevant legislation appropriately, or respectfully challenging or holding difficult questions. In a review of SARS concerning the deaths of people who were homeless, Martineau et al., 2019, there were concerns about practitioners' professional curiosity and highlighted examples such as including lack of interest in the homeless person's story. So basic baseline, just like how are you here? Looking at trauma-informed care, of actually learning about that person's life, how they've come to be in this position. Or people not seeing patterns in the person's records that might have led to safeguarding concern being raised. I can think of a gentleman that we had in our emergency department who every day was presenting absolutely freezing, having become very intoxicated, brought in by ambulance. And actually we initiated self-neglect. We raised a self-neglect safeguarding for that gentleman. So it's these patterns, it's asking these questions, it's thinking what's bringing this person to us, what situation are we looking at, and how might we possibly ask the right question to elicit some, meaningful response. Morgan 2017 argues that there's no substitute for professional curiosity in ensuring that assessments are holistic, support is appropriate so that we're not misguiding all our efforts. And multi-agency working is effective, so everyone knows what everyone's doing and there's an agreed plan. Findings from recent studies of SARS indicate that a greater degree of curiosity may have led to information or action that could have actually prevented harm. That's Bray et al. And Preston and Shute. Can we move to, sorry, we missed professional curiosity. Can we just move to the slide after that? Self-neglect threshold. Okay, so the self-neglect threshold tool seeks to support practitioners and partners and providers working within the adult sector to report and respond to concerns at the appropriate level and to have a consistency of approach across the agencies. This guidance is not a substitute for professional judgment. It's really important to be aware of that. Rather, it's to be used as a tool for decision making and to support professional judgment. We've given you a link to that tool. It's important to note that Sarah's vulnerability was never formally assessed. And I know particularly with regard to the work that we do with our community colleagues, district nursing and allied health professionals in the community and on admission to hospital, we're doing a lot of work raising the profile of this threshold tool. And practitioners are responding really, really positively to it because they can very quickly pick out where somebody sits on the threshold, and then they feel confident in how they're able to articulate their concerns to other agencies. They can direct other agencies if they're not aware of it to look at the threshold tool, who will also then see actually it is rating risk on an identified threshold tool. I'll show you the tool in a sec. So the threshold tool should determine a consistent approach to identifying what concerns may require a response under the safeguarding process. The tool supports decision-making when alternative processes should be used. If we could move to the thresholds tool, that would be brilliant. So just to give people an idea of how neat this tool is, actually, there's guidance alongside it, but actually for practitioners who are looking at self-neglect, concerns about self-neglect, there's a note to look at the guidance itself, but you can see low risk, medium risk, high risk, gives you examples, and it gives you guidance as to what action and outcome you should take. So it's very quickly, when I look at it with staff in supervision and on duty calls, very quickly staff are able to say, actually, that I've got someone with medium risk here, and I know what to do now. Thanks, I'll follow the process. Same for high risk. So the tool gives really practical guidance on the definition, how to assess the risk, and how to progress. It provides practitioners, as I've said, with a joint framework to which they can refer other agencies when seeking to explain their concerns and the risk rating. So it really helps in join the dots and actually get other agencies on board. Also, it encourages the calling of MDT, so it gets everyone around the table, a multidisciplinary team meeting. So if there's concerns that are deemed to be significant, hopefully I have explained that all for everyone. Learning point 4 was looking at partnerships and the importance of multi-agency working. The SAR recognized that multi-agency forums can be highly effective in responding to self-neglect, where a safeguarding adult inquiry is not yet required. So looking at that multi-agency working, those multidisciplinary team meetings, pulling everyone together if there's a concern, doesn't necessarily have to be under a safeguarding, people acting on early concerns and looking at early interventions to prevent progression of the concern. Multi-agency working at the earliest stage is essential in addressing concerns of self-neglect, as it facilitates sharing of all the information held by different agencies and a greater breadth of professional expertise. And I think that's pivotal. So you get everybody around the table overseeing the case to facilitate the development of a well-coordinated plan and identify the most appropriate lead. This is a very important point, is that we need a lead to be identified, and this will ensure ongoing communication and review, and somebody who takes responsibility for ensuring the plans progressed. Multi-agency forums need to demonstrate safeguarding-minded practice, and managers need to assure that attendees need to be adequately equipped to make effective responses to concerns of self-neglect, to make sure everybody's aware of the guidance and what's expected of them. Thanks, Jackie. We've moved on to, I thought, a really good example. I think everyone will at some point have dealt with the frustration that's illustrated here with "that's not my job." This is a story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody was blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. And I think really this is a prime example of what can happen when there's an identified job to be done with no clear framework to agree roles and responsibilities for action and accountability, which can lead to conflict and confusion and a failure to act, even though all those people were aware of the important job to be done. And I certainly recognize those circumstances where, unfortunately, professionals can end up being sidetracked from keeping the adults or child the focus of the meeting, and it can start to come down to who's going to pick the job up. So I think that's what's really important with regard to a lead professional and any MDT meeting, is actually that roles are allocated, identified and allocated on the basis of who's best equipped. In relation to SAR, although information was shared at ICC, the sad fact was that no agency took responsibility for a thorough follow-up on SAR. Finally, we've got learning point 5, which is accountability. And the note of being accountable and having complete transparency in delivering safeguarding practice. The fact that everyone knows safeguarding is everybody's business, and accountability makes sure that everyone plays their part when it comes to safeguarding vulnerable people. The SAR for SARA has highlighted key reflected learning themes from other review systems need to be in place to support practitioners in working with self-neglect and resistance to engagement. Practitioners need time to be able to be professionally curious, to evaluate the information gathered, and have the time to take the additional measures required. It's essential that practitioners have access to supportive and reflective supervision alongside time and opportunities for them to participate in multidisciplinary workshops and reflective sessions. So hopefully I've covered the learning points for you there, and Jackie's going to follow on with the recommendations.
So these sad circumstances, they weren't unique to Sarah. The review reinforced but didn't repeat the recommendations already made in the previous SAR for Pauline and George. Recognises the steps that we've already taken to improve services since Sarah's death. Work continues across the partnership to embed the learning from Pauline and George. And this SAR, the SAR for Sarah, makes 2 further recommendations for action. As we all know, Cumbria County Council's just been through major reform with local government reshape, which came into effect on the 1st of April. And that's kind of similar to the previous case I shared where a person's needs got missed and forgotten because of reshaping and reforms of teams. The Safeguarding Adult Board will be seeking reassurance from both councils in respect to their review of the single point of access function, recognising that some of the learning in respect of the front door and safeguarding concerns that were raised with Sarah were also identified in Pauline and George. In Westmoreland and Furness, we've already started to take action to pilot a multidisciplinary team approach to SPA, and the Safeguarding Adult Board will also be picking this up with the 2 newly appointed Directors of Adult Social Care, DAS, for each council in due course. And they ask that they provide update assurances and evidence of the review to the board. Safeguarding Adult Board will also pick up the learning around the Mental Capacity Act during a week of action planned for the 19th of June, where there'll be a series of lunch and learn lessons and daily briefings issued. And as a board, they'll hear the lived experiences through stories to the board from service users and carers, examples of good practice to the L&D subgroup. And through our training conferences recently, this included involvement of expert by experience and a focus on professional curiosity. So discussions have begun as well in respect to the membership of the Task and Finish group, which the Safeguarding Adult Board will establish, and this group will review arrangements as the recommendations noted above in the slides. That we're in the process of identifying a chair for this group to ensure a clear understanding of multi-agency forums, the purpose and how to refer, and also to ensure the membership of those forums consider safeguarding as standard practice. So at the heart of self-neglect practice, it's a complex balance of knowing, being and doing. Knowing in the sense of really understanding the person, their history, the significance of self-neglect, alongside with all our professional knowledge and resources that underpin our professional practice. Being in the sense of showing personal and professional qualities of respect, empathy, honesty, reliability, care, being present, staying alongside, keeping company, building relationships, that social pedagogy that should be at heart and central of our practice. And doing in the sense of balancing that hands-on and hands-off approach. Working with people with self-neglect is tricky. And sometimes you have to kind of seize the moment for the tiny opportunities where you can do a tiny little thing for agreement that can still make a small difference whilst negotiating for the bigger things. So that could be something just as simple as kind of supporting and encouraging for someone to agree for a a follow-up for an appointment, perhaps a little bit of encouragement and support to get that person to an appointment. And also about them deciding with others when the risks are so great that some intervention has to take place. So this video does just really poignantly illustrate the challenges alongside the rewards when we're working with people around self-neglect and making safeguarding personal. I'm aware that the sound isn't working, but the sound's music. So hopefully, I think if you can just watch the video and read the transcript.